Greetings and Talapalava. We welcome you to another session of Talanoa. We'd like to thank you for allowing us to enter into your home through this virtual feed.
As many of you know, Talanoa is a Pasifika cultural method that means to have dialogue. When broken down, the word Tala means story and the word Noa means to tie. It is through Talanoa that we look to tie our stories together in order to have a clear understanding about topics that impact our cutie pie as well as the greater queer, trans, black, indigenous, and people of color community.
Before we begin, Utopia Washington continues to recognize that we as diasporic indigenous people pull resources and reside on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people, the Duwamish, Muckleshoot, and Puyallup tribes.
It is important to understand the long-standing history that has brought us and other settlers, colonizers, and indigenous peoples to reside on these lands, and to seek an analysis and continue understanding of our place within that history and present being.
Land recognition does not reside in the past tense or historical context. Colonialism is an ongoing weapon, and we need to find ways to build mindfulness of our present participation and how to truly stand in solidarity with First Nations people and how to support their health, their growth, and self-governance.
Indigenous First Nations peoples are still here, and we continue to thank them for their contributions.
We are honored by your presence this evening. Afio Maya, Talamaya.
Welcome to Talanoa.
Good morning, everyone. So, my name is Kiana Puenga, and I'm just here to facilitate a very important conversation for our Pacific people today in the honor of Black History Month. And on behalf of Utopia, we wanted to address a very important topic in our community today, anti-Blackness in the Pacific. And so here with me, I have you all who have rich experiences from your own lived experiences, and I wanted to ensure that we platform those and get insight and feedback on this Talanoa today. So how about I'll introduce myself and then I'll pass it around the table for you all to introduce yourselves as well. As I mentioned, my name is Kiana Puenga. My family is from Orosinga Manua and Leone in America, Samoa. But I always name that I come from there by way of Tacoma because I'm a child of the diaspora. So I grew up for the most part here in the U.S. And currently reside in Duwamish territory as a PhD student at the University of Washington. I find this conversation to be super important, as well as the work that Utopia has put into our community here. So I'm glad to be here today. So I'm going to send it this way over to Mirius.
Thank you, Kiana. So my name is Mirius, and I'm from the West Papua. The West Papua is the Guinea Islands, but it's PNG, and the eastern side is PNG, and the western side is West Papua. So I'm the western side of the islands. And I born and raised in the islands, and I came here in 2016 to complete my education. And then right now, I'm working at Pikawa and while raising the awareness work going on in the islands.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Buluvinaka, and hello. My name is Amasai Cheke, and I go by she and her pronouns. And originally from Fiji, from Tailevu, Wuzitokotoka is where I'm from. Born and raised in the islands. And I moved here to the US in 2019, and I resided in California in a very small town, Santa Rosa, and then last year, around this time, I moved to Washington, Seattle, and I got acquainted to the girls here, and I was part of their cohort, the Trans Leadership Program, and then later transitioned to one of their staff members. And now I do the regional work for Utopia, and it's so great to be here to have this conversation. Thank you.
My name is Odessa, and I use she, her pronouns, and I was born and raised in Tacoma, Washington. I've never been to the islands of Samoa. I am half black and half Samoan, and I think it's super important that we have this conversation because it's not talked about within our community.
Thank you, Dessa. You know what? And I didn't even name my pronouns either. Thank you for the reminder, y'all. So I use she/her pronouns as well. So we will jump right into the conversation. I know like anti-blackness in today's day and age, we use it very often. We hear it in the media, or we hear about anti-racism, as this is in the past few years has been a turning time in the U.S. about racial relations, not just amongst us as society, but amongst law enforcement. But I wanted to make sure that we ground that in our conversation today. It's a common term that's used amongst nonprofits and in social justice settings. But I wanted to just get feedback from you all. When you hear the word anti-blackness, what does that mean to you?
I feel like, to me, anti-blackness is where people who are not a minority, they go against black people or black people's values and turn away from them in a way because they're not in the power of the majority.
Yeah, so like minoritized people, so like non-white folks, like discriminating against our black community, like folks in the black identity.
I think she said it well, and for me it's really the oppressor. Like, it oppresses people who are not white, and it continues to do that in different ways. And the conversation around even those who are not black but who are colored, for example, maybe Indian people, Fijian, Samoa, people from Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, Papua New Guinea, who are non-black but colored, who also go through, forms of racism because of the color of our skin, and how the light skin or white people have, formed ways of superiority over others just because of the color of our skin. Yeah.
So kind of like there's an element of colorism within that, which is important to name, because I want to name too, like my experience as a Samoan American woman is not that of someone who has identities that might be qualified or verified as black, and that might be different for those of you here at the table. And I want to invite you all to share, and I want to leave that entirely up to you about like what does that look like then amongst us, like. I know, like, we're talking about the term anti-blackness, but how does it show up among us as specific people?
For me, I think too often we don't have this conversation as specific colored people because we tend to always, the love of being Pacifica, and we carry that with us everywhere we go. Like, I come with me, I don't come alone, I come with my people who are Pacifica people. I think when we really dive into systems and also guess policies and intersectionality around colorism in the Pacific region, we really get to also understand why it exists even within our Pacific culture. That I think for too long, and I guess we had this conversation yesterday on our call around, how if you're the perception within the Pacific region for often too long, and I've seen this through the years, is that if you are lighter skin, like it's always been the definition of the embodiment of what a Pacifica person look like curve, beauty, standard. And we've standardized and normalized the beauty standard of what someone who, like a Pacific woman should look like. And we see this in pageants and how we've standardized the standard of beauty within our culture, within how things should look like. Like, if you have curly hair or a bit darker skin, we tend to say things, but we don't say it to people's face. But that's how it's always been, but we can never have that conversation, because for us is, oh, we still together, we share the same ocean, we feed off the same land, we are sisters because we come from the same islands. But we can never sit down and have an uncomfortable conversation about, for too long, those who are lighter skinned within the Pacific region dominate how the Pacific culture should look like. And for sometimes I get really angry at times, because for me my personal is political. And if I'm identified wrongly, it's okay, because I will then correct you. So for me it's like, oh, you're from Fiji, oh, you're Polynesian. I'm like, no, I'm Melanesian. I'm from Fiji. Fiji is part of the Melanesian group. But then again, that's still colonialized, and the amazing work that you do, and the amazing work all of us do, is to really think around, how do we decolonize our bodies that continue to think in that same way?
Yeah, because if you think about it, just kind of conceptually, the Pacific region, like Melanesia, Micronesia, Polynesia, the largest region in terms of population is Melanesia. So you would assume, if there's way more Melanesians in this Pacific region, then the dominant perceptions of the Pacific should look more Melanesian, but we don't. They look like the kind of dusky women trope of the long hair, the fair or lighter skinned, or which. Ironic, because I was like, the sun is shining. how are they lighter, or only a certain tan? But I think a lot of that is shaped by foreign views of the Pacific, of what paradise looks like, and I think oftentimes paradise, they don't associate that to darker toned folks, even though that is much of the Pacific. And that is any of the islands. If you spend your time outdoors, which is many of us, I'm like, we are not like people. So there's an irony there. Yeah.
For us, it's even within the Black Lives Movement, it's really centered around. I forgot what to say. I lost my train of thought. It's really centered around, Black Lives Matter, those who identify as black. This movement is meant for you. And those of us who don't identify, that live here in diaspora, we are then all colored. But then when we go back home, in our region, then it's a different conversation. But then for me here, the Black Lives Movement, here I think for too long, it's important, the riot that's been going on, to see the amount of death of, black people on our streets, especially in the US, it's bad. And we continue to hear this every time we turn on the television to watch the news. Someone is killed. Oh, it's a black man, it's a black woman. But too often as well, even within the Black Lives Movement, they tend to then push away those who identify differently. For example, black transgender women have always been left out within their organizing. And we see the amount of the death of black transgender women here in America. They don't stand up for those girls. They don't do riots to get back at the system that continued to kill black women, black transgender women particularly. And I think it's also the same even within the Pacific region, but we don't talk about it.
Yeah, so there's these nuances. It's not just being black Pacific, but also how you identify as trans, that there's not the same support to talk about those. And because we kind of uncover what does anti-blackness look like, it uncovers maybe ways that we may be discriminatory against folks within our own community, but in multiple layers, and not just by way of colorism or race, but also just by like sexual identity too. And I think that that's something really important to highlight. Thank you for bringing that up. I thought what Mary's going to say.
The another things that it's come up in my mind is in my regions. That is my region is part of Indonesia, and the racism that one thing that it's really hurt my heart. It's that just for the advertisement, it's really hard to be black in West Papua. So because the advertisement only advertisement, like for example like in like all the products like makeup and stuff, like being black, it's not identified, it's not qualified to be a beautiful.
Yeah.
But we as West Papuan, we said like the black in our language is we call it hitamanis, which means the black is really sweet or really pretty.
Yeah.
But that's not identified in the Indonesia. So that's some things that if you look it up on the Google or stuff, there is no black identified as a beautiful.
Yeah.
So that's
and like Indonesia is like that's where the government is in West Papua. It's under like Indonesian governance, but the native people of West Papua are Black Pacifica people.
We identify,
and there's no like recognition of the native people of this land and the beauty of the native people in this land, which shows like kind of again like this point about colorism and anti-blackness. It's not just a black and white thing, but it persists across the globe, and it shows up in places like West Papua, not just in like beauty acts, but even just to the extent of like how West Papuans are treated. And I don't know if you wanted to talk about that. I know we talked about it in our conversation.
That's like, thank you for bringing it up. Just imagine that's in 2008, 2021, and that's the one diplomat from Nigeria, and he went to Jakarta and on the street, and the immigration officer, the officer that just manhandled. If you Google it, you will find it. And that's because of the being black in Indonesia. It's really hard. So that's why a lot of my people, like in the West Papua regions, like until 2000, but 1960s up to now, there's not even like even Papua New Guinea or Fiji, but right now it's like the message is getting out because all of us out here. So there's the block, there's the media block, Red Cross block, and UN also they broke out. So that's like the Pacifica people in West Papua that suffers like almost 70 years now, and that's outside it never been heard about.
Suffer like genocide.
And that's leading to genocide. Like in 1960s, that's Papua New Guinea population to compare to West Papua. Papua New Guinea was 2 million people, and Papua New Guinea now is almost 9 million. But in compared to West Papua, it was in 1960 it was 8 million people, and now dropped down to 2 million people. So that's the racism. It's really happening because of being black. It's really hard in the regions. That's another thing. And also every hour since 1970 up to now, like all the governors, all the native indigenous governor and indigenous leader been targeted to be criminalized, and some of them been issued with their corruption, and they ended up in the jail, or otherwise they will die. And a lot of leaders are dying, and the latest update right now is the Mr. Governor Lucas Nembe. So just imagine this. This is his money in his banking account. It's 73 million rupees, and because of the 1 million, they assume that he corrupt. They right now it's like he's active governor, but put him into the jail now. Now he's handcuffed.
And I'm trying to just imagine, I'm trying to put this world together, Mirius, that you lived through, because you're coming here from West Papua and you experience that on your own lands, and then you come here to the U.S., which, you know, has its own issues. What has that been like for you?
Yeah, it's really tough, to be honest. It's really tough. And I'm also, if I go back home, I will feel the same as my people. And I will not express what is the racism going on, colonialism going on, genocide going on. I cannot talk about it. Even right now, it's the Ukraine issue. It's like boom, almost everywhere.
Yeah.
And West Papua, we are facing this exactly the same thing.
Yeah, and it's been going on for a very long time.
It's like almost it's decade and decade, and people never talk about it.
Yeah. So there's an erasure to just like social issues in different parts of the region. Where there's like, you know, that's evidence, right, in parts of Africa, and wars that have been waging in Africa we never hear about, and then it hits Ukraine and it's across the global news, and the same goes for West Papua. I remember I just learned about it like 10 years ago, but then I learned, I was like, it's been going on way before you just learned. I'm like, how come I don't know this? Because we're all from the Pacific, and you know, when we talk about this very Pacific connected place, our assumption is that we know about what's happening in the other islands, but we don't. And part of that is by what we consume in the media, that shapes how we pay attention to things, but it also it has an impact on how we treat other issues too, right? It erases the plight of some folks over others, and that oftentimes tends to be black folks. And we see that in the U.S., but that's also a global issue as well.
Yeah, one of the things, like really big example happened in 2017. Like there were West Papuan students. They were studying in Surabaya. That's one of the city in Indonesia. And this is the officer, the military, and some of them are cop. And they went there in the dormitory, and they told them like, "Hey, monkey, go home."
In the universities.
No, in the dorm.
In the dorms.
In the dorm. And that's like huge riot happened, but the outside world never hear about it.
Yeah.
That's the happen that monkey go home, and then another things happen is one of the players, football players, soccer player, his name is Boas Sarosa, and when they play in one of the in Indonesia, and they throw the banana. After they peel the bananas and they throw them, that doesn't make sense.
That's almost like this, like the racism that happens. Like it's everywhere, but it's so silenced. But if we, those sort of things happen to other folks who have power, if that happens to white people or males or here in the U.S., right? Like there's an explosion everywhere. But if that happens to people who don't have those same powers, it's just like, well, it's supposed to be that way, or that's just life. And I think that's why this conversation is so important, because it unsettles that these happen all the time. And I'm hearing this, and I'm just like that's I feel angry myself, but and then I also hear these sorts of things all the time, but they only come up in these sort of conversations, and I'm like, no, this should come up all the time. We shouldn't wait until people feel comfortable about it. Like, if you gotta be uncomfortable, all of us have to be uncomfortable. All of us have to unpack this so that we stop these sorts of things from happening, and we do our own due diligence. As I know that you had been sharing some earlier, but I'll toss it to you, but only if you want to. I have a question to say.
Going back to what Amasai was saying about beauty standards, like here in the U.S., because I haven't been to my homeland, but even just in the U.S., it's hard being of darker skin, especially in the Pacific community, because they look at you even though you're darker, and they don't treat you the same if you wear like the standardized way of a Samoan. And my Samoan tie, they'll be like, oh yeah, you're too Samoan, but you look too black. It's just, but there's a lot of colorism going towards it, because I know some Samoans, especially the older generations, they feel like they don't like black people, and they make it obvious to me. But they say, oh, you're different because you're so-and-so's granddaughter, or you're different because you're so-and-so's daughter. But, it's not the same because, I've been called the N-word by family members. Even though, like, they try to laugh it off and be like, oh, no, it's just a joke. It's just a joke. We love you. Da, da, da. It sometimes still hurts because, I am still half black. And, my black side, they don't give me any back feed on it. But I know, like, they feel like I'm distant because I did grow up trying to be more Samoan, joining myself into these specific communities, joining more and more, keep learning more of the culture rather than spending time with my black side. But yeah, definitely for colorism is a big deal that's not talked about a lot in the Pacific, and there's so many examples like we could go through, like just going into churches and the families and the schools. When I was growing up, I lived in Tacoma, and we had a really big PI community. And, I grew up around them. I moved my last year, and there was a smaller PI community, and they were not united at all. They saw me as just black. I wasn't any kind of poly to them. But, yeah, they're definitely growing together if we just have conversations like these. But, yeah.
Yeah. Is it like when you were switching to like a different school?
Yeah. It was more of like predominantly white.
Yeah. Like you brought up a really good point, like when people say stuff against you and then they're like, oh, no, you're different because you're so-and-so's granddaughter, or, there's a closeness to you, like there's a connection to you, which makes them see you differently. And I guess that my issue has always been, I'm like, well, then if you can see somebody because of, their likeness to you, then we should be able to see that for all people, right? And I think, like, if we're able to see that more, like, people's humanity or their, like, whatever common grounds we have, like, that takes out the differences we have. The differences is what makes things beautiful, but I'm like, but the likeness is what connects us, right? And I've seen that have, like, a lot just, when we say stuff against a certain identity group that people are a part of, we're like, no, but you're different. I was like, no, I'm still black. Like, you said that, and it literally is against black folks, and we have to own that. And I think that's important that, when we're talking about anti-blackness, that we look at, like, how does that show up in our communities? Like, it shows up in us, like, knowing that all of West Papua is under they've been genocided for decades by now, but barely anyone knows that on this side of the Pacific, when in the diaspora here in the U.S. And the only reason why I'd known that is because university students talked about it a lot, which, if you think about Pacific people, not a lot of them are in the universities here in the U.S., so it still makes it a very a smaller conversation than what we should know about our own Pacific region, or when we hear about, like, issues of colorism, or just people just saying racist things to you. Like, we never hear about that unless that's, like, it's been said to a family member of ours, or unless we be the one who said that to our family members themselves, and then they bring it up and like, oh, I mean, that's just funny. You're one of us. I'm like, So, we're gonna take a little break for now. We have really rich conversations, and I have some more questions that I want to bring forth to us, but I just want to give us a water break. So get like self-care break, so you breathe, and come back in just another minute. All right, so we had this is so important, like the very many different ways that anti-blackness has shown up. You all shared just different experiences that you've had. I want to push us in the direction of, like, how do we engage this then? Because I have my own thoughts, right? And I have a reputation of my own thoughts, and, like, I address it directly. We will be uncomfortable together. But I think that's my job, right? Like, my responsibility is not just to be a bystander and listen to you all share this, but it's also my job to, like, when I hear it, put a stop to it. Or address it directly, and let me and whoever else be uncomfortable together, right? Sweaty armpits, all of us. But I want to hear also from you all. How do we engage in these uncomfortable conversations, or how would you recommend we engage in uncomfortable conversations? Be that how the things that people say to you, or the ways that people are treated, or histories that are ignored, or even like perceptions of the Pacific Islander, the quintessential Pacific Islander. Like, what are ways that we can engage those uncomfortable conversations?
I definitely feel like, even though I'm young, I know as somebody who's young.
Me too.
I am too.
But, as somebody as young as me, I just feel like it's harder to bring up the uncomfortable conversations, especially when it's coming from somebody who's older than me. So coming up to them with that, it's a little harder.
Yeah.
But when Mane texted me about this Talanoa, I was so excited because it's been heavy on my heart since coming from California, and all the polys looking at me when I was entering into a church. They're looking at me like, "Why are you here? You shouldn't be here." But Mane texted me, and I was so excited to have this conversation with everybody because I was like, this is exactly what we need to start something, because it's not brought up a lot within the Pacific community. A lot of things are pushed to the side and thrown away or dismissed, and just coming to sit down, with people who you feel like will really understand you, and like you could talk to them about it. Because I know for me it was hard, especially with my family, because I don't want them to like, "Oh, it's just a joke, like why are you taking it so serious? It's just a joke." Like, I don't want them to laugh at me because they think it's like, "Oh, don't even worry, like your family." But coming down, sitting down, talking with everybody, like this is really, I feel like it's a really good step into starting something.
Yeah. Like, if you were, let's put it this way, Jessica, like, thinking of those experiences that you've had, if you were able to say anything to them, right? Like, say that is me, right? I gotta zip my mouth, mute me, okay? Like, what would you say? There's no repercussions. You would say, like, if you could say what you wanted to say, and you put the elder part aside, you put all of the titles that layer our community aside, and you told them how you feel, if you're willing to, like, what would you say?
I just let them know, like, I'm uncomfortable with that as somebody who is half black. Like, even though they don't think, like, I'm part of my black side, they don't think I'm connected to that. It still hurts me. I'm still uncomfortable with you saying that around me. Yeah, I'm just.
And I guess we've created this hypothesis about if you're older in a community, you earn some sort of respect, and you should be respected. I can't talk over you. I can't hold you accountable. I can't eat before you, or that exists also within our Pacific region. And I think we've created this hierarchy that's very colonialist as well, because it's the way that the white people have come in and said, this is structures, you have to follow this structure, and this is the way that it should be. And we've taken that into consideration because for too long we can't have uncomfortable conversations with our elders because we've systemed it that way, that I can't talk, to my dad in such a way that I'm scared. But then he's my father.
Yeah.
He's supposed to love and care for me. Or he's my grandmother. They're supposed to care for me because I'm family. But then we've created this system within how elders should be, and we can't always, I feel this way and I don't like it, and we can't. And it creates this, how we bottle things up, and it puts a lot of pressure on people. And I've seen this, particularly in Fiji, like with young people who bottle things up continuously. And Fiji has one of the largest number of suicide cases, especially for young people. And then the only time you see parents when they go to the morgue and they take traditional stuff to say, "Oh, can you say that it was death by disease or sickness," that they can't write because the person died of suicide.
Yeah.
So we see a lot of, we create these structures and hierarchies where people can't be normal to each other. And we've made it like so bad. Like even me sometimes, I feel like when I'm going through stuff, like I'm so scared to talk to my mom. Or because it's the way maybe she'll react. But over time, that when I started coming into this work around social justice and creating the way that I think around my feminist principles and praxis, if things are uncomfortable, we have to talk about it. If the thing is irritating you in that conversation, then I guess it's working. And if it's conversation like this, and we're able to even have this uncomfortable conversation, then I think we should have more of this and bring more people into the conversation so that we're able to talk about the Black Lives Movement or anti-blackness, the issues around West Papua, that we are able to even talk about the very uncomfortable things that even within the Pacific region, when we talk about the existence of colorism, we then so fast to forget the existence of third gender people in our region who are killed. Before moving to the US, I've experienced 2 young transgender women who were killed because of who they are. A very close friend of mine, Lucky, who was murdered brutally, left lying on the street until a security guard saw her body in the early morning, lie there with the tool that was used to kill her. Until today, within even our justice system, justice is not served. It's because she's trans. And even with Magnus was killed brutally, very bad, left lying down in the plantation until they found her body the next day. And in Samoa, the death of Fafafine, we don't talk about it. Tonga recently, and we don't talk about these issues. And one of the amazing work that I really want to, highlight is the cultural work that we do here at UTOPIA, Washington, is around rooted in culture. And we've made sure to highlight all Pacific Island countries, including Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, even Papua New Guinea was part of that cultural segment, is because we want to tell folks as well that people exist who are different, who even identify with their cultural identity. I come from Fiji. My cultural identity is I'm a Vakasana in a manner of a woman. And then there's cultural identities of Palopa who exist in Papua New Guinea. And that's, one of the ways that uncomfortable conversation should really begin, is that something that really moves the soul, maybe to do better, I think, or really to shift the way that we do this work.
Yeah, because there's all these kind of like multi-layered silencing, right?
Yeah.
Like just asking just this question, like just the idea of just like it's a hypothetical and it's already uncomfortable just thinking about that, right? I think that speaks to the volume of how loud the silencing is in our culture when you're not in positions of power, be that by way of your gender, being cisgendered, being like non-black. Like there's all of these kind of layered privileges that we may not recognize because it's not much of part of our language in our cultures, but they still exist, right? The power that you have or you don't have exists, and you see that come up in who gets the platform to get to talk, like who gets to discuss, who gets to speak out, who gets to say I'm uncomfortable, and then there's those who have that ability, and then there's those who don't. And I think in a very important way we have that here at the table. I thank you for saying that, for naming that, just kind of like the nuances of what silencing looks like. Gosh, I had a question and it's like a lot of questions are coming up right now. I don't know if I try to talk to this, but I'm kind of on this train of thought on just like what does silencing look like, and the uncomfortable conversations, like how do we approach it? Because to a much, much lesser extent. I was doing, like last night, I was trying to help my daughter with her math homework, and she hates math. And so, her reaction is like really angry and throwing a fit. And when I grew up, I'm like, we couldn't do this. I would get slapped a long time ago, and I'm like, I gotta give her space. And just kind of like breaking the habits of how I was raised to teach her a different way in this generation was me trying to figure out, like, how do I do the work that's needed for the future? Because there's a part of us, I think, that we preserve a lot of our cultural views in our histories because it's so ingrained into our identities. But we're confronted with issues of the present and the future that need to be unpacked, because we're going to have more children who identify as trans because they're given the language to identify, and we need to be prepared as a community to do that. We have, in the US, like, we're constantly, like, we have all of these mixed generations. Like, you see it, I see it at church all the time when, our Alpha Lavo does performances, and there's like all of these kids, you can see they're half white, they're half black, they're half Mexican, and I'm like, look at this mixed community, it's beautiful. But we have to be prepared for what sort of challenges will they have, and how do we receive them as people who are like taking our community forward in the next steps. I guess my thoughts for you all is like, how do you see us addressing that? Because I think uncomfortable conversations is one thing, right? What might be some other ways that we look at, like preparing ourselves for the generations of the future? Because you brought that up so greatly. I'm like trying to have discussions with your mom and that being really hard. Like, but we have to. That's the reality that we live in, right? Like we have to think of, okay, what does it look like? What does it look like in practice?
Even telling her like, oh, I'm finally transitioning.
Yeah.
I'm on hormones. Yeah. It was so hard to even tell her that.
Yeah.
But then I had to find peace in myself, and then keep reminding myself I have to. Because I cannot transition in this world alone. I have to be with family. And when I told my mom, she was happy. And she said, finally, like, now we're able to have this conversation about, now I want to know, what's the transition? Oh, I'm on hormones, so I have to, inject myself every week. Oh, okay. Are you doing it by yourself? Yeah. Are you okay? Are you okay with needles? Yeah, I'm fine with needles now. I can finally inject myself now. But for the past 2 weeks, it has been really hard just trying to poke myself with a needle. And it's those kind of conversations that really, like, for me, it's really sparks movement. And I think of stories of transgender women in Fiji particularly that is also connected to every transgender woman who live their truth and live their reality, is that it's always about purchasing of power. Most of us have to work hard as anybody else, be better than anybody else, so that we're able to put food on the table, so that we're able to give to family function, so that we're able to give to uncle's birthday, give to auntie's funeral, and provide gifts for everybody, so that we'll have a voice at the table. And if we don't give that, we don't have any say, but we belong in the kitchen. You are flower decorators, you put on the makeup and entertain. But when it comes to decision making, no. You sit here on the side, that's where you belong. But then until you put something on this table, then you have a seat. And the amazing thing that we're creating here within Utopia is that, who needs a fucking seat at a table when we can create our own? We're creating our own. And then through that we're even able to have internal uncomfortable conversation. Too often we are having uncomfortable conversation outside our doors. But it needs to begin within. And I heard this proverb, I can't remember who said it. It's peace in the home and then peace in the world. And that's always been like a mantra, that I can't assume that the world will be a better place for me if I'm not at peace with myself. So for me, I had to hold myself accountable. How can I transition in this world and not be true to people that I love?
Yeah, and it starts, first in home with ourselves, or and then at home with our families, and at home in the community, and kind of the more that we take that outward, the more we're able to kind of build waves of change. How about you, Marius?
Yeah, killing the conversations about the what is that called, the uncomfortable conversations. It's exactly it's a Pacifica. We respect the elders. We respect the elders, and then like everything what they say is right, even though it's not right.
We can't challenge that, but it needs to be challenged.
That's true. So the things that because for me it's like being activist, it's for a human right. It's really hard for me because that's a lot of previous West Papuan leaders, campaigners and stuff. And like because when I coming out and then I see it differently, and then that's kind of like okay. So one thing that I came up with like, hey, don't underestimate me. So I have different. It doesn't mean like we separate, but don't underestimate because I'm educated. I can see what is going on, and I can see the plug into it. And then it connected to the uncomfortable with the colorism, and I feel like that's something that I learned the past when I worked with the raising the awareness what really going on in back home. And I realized that okay, this is exactly that if the what is it called? Why don't we if Amanda, for example, like if I care about the Pacifica or if I care about my people in back home, and if we say like colorism in the Pacific people, what's the point I'm speaking? Like for example, like liberate market and whose people is this? So that's some things like I just that's some things that that I learned that okay if I'm speaking about the human right, if I'm speaking about these to liberate the people and stuff, this is the something that we need to look after the conversation like this. We have to build even though we're not happy, but
in different ways, they're all tied together, right?
We can. That's some things that I learned, and I think that's really interesting.
I like that. Like especially the conversation around human rights. For too often, human rights have become like bargaining chips. You bargain one away so that I can get one away. And we see this even within the United Nations Security Council, how the 5 countries that hold power within that system continues to detect what happens. Like, if the UN really cared about the issue that's been going on in West Papua, I'm sure they would send a big army to put the borders, protect people in West Papua and give them the full autonomy to independence. And we don't do that because somehow, like the Fiji government, I think in 2018 when Samoa hosted the Pacific Leaders Forum, and the leader, the Prime Minister then for Solomon Islands, came up with an agenda for all Pacific Island country to support what's happening in West Papua. All countries stood up, but one country didn't, Fiji. And it was the most saddest thing ever. I was ashamed to even be a Fijian that was doing political work, talking about human rights and gender equality and sustainable development goals and what that should look like, when even your own country didn't stand up to fight for your one talk. And we've created this relationship within the Melanesian group that really it's about solidarity as a foundation of how we organize. And that happened in that time. The room went quiet to see Fiji didn't even support the country that was right beside Papua New Guinea, that our Mel brothers, our One Talk brothers, but didn't support. So it goes to show that most of these countries, these leaders, they do it because of money. It's because Indonesia was pouring money into Fiji. Indonesia was giving supplies into Fiji that really shut Fiji's mouth in order, like, you can't do that. But I hope in this new government in Fiji we're able to change that narrative, that we're able to support West Papua and make change. And I think it also has to do with those of us that are on this table having this conversation about West Papua, because we don't always have West Papua in our conversation. And I think we talked about this yesterday around the issues around climate change. Yeah, it's important. And we talk about climate change because it's our lived experience as Pacific Island people who contribute 0.1% to the climate emission. And our people who live in the Pacific who are facing the brunt. But West Papuan people are dying every day, and I've seen photos like it's
yeah, in the interconnected of it, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to draw us back in towards our conclusion. But the all of this is interconnected, right? So like, what is the point of climate change and fighting for climate change if there's if the people on the islands, the people in West Papua are being brutally murdered, right, or genocided, and what is the point of us like standing in solidarity in West Papua if we're not also paying that same attention to how we discriminate against people here in the U.S. that we live right alongside, and if we're standing there, then also we should also pay attention to how we're taking care of our trans sisters and brothers. And so like all of these movements to stand in solidarity, they're interconnected, because at the basis of it's the humanity of us, and that's really what the conversation on anti-blackness kind of cracks open, is to recognize ways that we kind of inhibit and express discriminatory behaviors in so many different ways, right? But particularly against blackness and through colorism in our communities. And so I guess my question to you all that is, if there is one way or something that you would want to say to our Pacific community as it regards like anti-blackness, a message that you want to leave with them, or maybe a charge that you want to leave with them. I want to put that on the table for you all to take up and give a moment to deliberate or say as you're ready.
For me, it's a behalf of West Papua. Thank you. And then if the one thing I want to put, if you are students, do your research on the Pacific regions. That's really important with climate change or human rights. That's really, or geopolitics in the Pacific. That's really important. That's really it.
I think for me is one thing that we continues to do, especially for our community, for LGBTQI Pacifica people that live in diaspora, is we're starting to collect data for our people, because we don't want other people to do it for us and gatekeep those data that's about our people. So we're taking the initiative and taking the lead role into doing this work about collecting quality data that can be utilized within our Pacific Island community, that we're able to use it amongst ourselves to raise awareness, to write better policies, to create change within laws and how legislation work here in the US. And I think that's all, like you said, interconnected. And I think the words of Audre Lorde that we don't live single issue lives, we live multiple intersecting forms of lives. And we come into this world and moved by the lived experiences of other people and the way that we do this together. It's beautiful. And to me, like every day I come into this work is knowing that I'm learning. It's another learning day today for me. Learning that even we always assume, like with Odessa, when I saw her today, I quickly assumed she was Fijian. And that's this kind of conversation that we need to have. And also for me, it's like, that really is a burning right now for me is for those that live in the Pacific region say that we are not Pacific enough because we're in the global north. I just want to say no. There's no way we're disconnected from our lived experience at home. Some of us decide to move so that we can live a better life and to be able to access services that aren't able to be accessed back home. But we are very well connected back into our roots back home. Even if it's the way we give to develop family back home, that's the way of giving. And it's just that because we live in America, we are not Pacific enough, or we shouldn't talk on behalf of the Pacific region. No, we are the Pacific, and we are here organizing with everyone that's doing this work back home. And I just want to close by saying that it's always important that when we do this work around social justice movement, that it's about everyone and anyone and with people that we bring along. And for me, it's always, the way that I do it is that it's about our bodies. It's because our bodies get to navigate and make priorities on how we take on what we want and we leave what we don't want. And it's because it's our bodies that has to deal with all this crap, deal with all these emotions and whatever we go through. So at times, it's always good to give our bodies a break. Self-care is important, Miriam. Don't overwork yourself, and Odessa, and our lovely host, Kiana. And thank you all of you, for your amazing work and knowledge and power.
I just want to say, for the youth and the young adults, to just be comfortable and have these uncomfortable conversations with your family members and the people around you who you feel like is, making you feel uncomfortable and hurting you with these words, because it will take a toll on your mental health, and mental health isn't really talked about in the Pacific, but once you bring it up, I'm sure they will understand you because they love you and they're always there for you. So yeah, don't let anybody look down on you because you're young, but do the research, understand, if they look down on you, prove them wrong.
Any last words? I just want to say I appreciate. I'm kind of a sponge over here, so I'm taking everything in, and I'm just thinking through questions that you all have sparked so much in me to just kind of think through and do my work when I get home. Doing more research, right, and being responsible myself, and thinking about how I show up for others. That's my work to do. And my only message is just for everyone who's watching this to do their due diligence as well. That this is a conversation. While we had it at this table, it doesn't stay at this table. And so folks had the opportunity to listen in and hear from their lived experiences. My hope is that they take that with them to shape how they do life on an everyday basis.
Period.
Ara, that was a great conversation.
A great talanoa and conversation indeed.
Yes. We'd like to thank our panelists for taking time to have this important conversation and for sharing their brilliance with us.
A special thank you to you, our viewers, for tuning in. We thank you for your support. We hope to see you at our next talanoa.
Manuia.